The DNA came back, and it did not give investigators what they needed. That is the headline inside the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping case today, a case that has already stretched past 80 days, already sent evidence to the FBI's most capable forensic laboratory, already drawn attention from the highest levels of the federal government, received a result this week from its most closely watched forensic thread. And that result, according to sources familiar with the investigation, has not broken the case open. It has sent investigators in a new direction, searching for what the DNA found on a pair of gloves recovered during the investigation could not tell them. There is, however, something else, something that shifts the atmosphere of this case in a way that a forensic result alone cannot. The FBI has received DNA data from hair samples collected inside Nancy Guthrie's home. That data is now in investigators' hands. What it shows, whether it matches a known profile, whether it eliminates someone, whether it points somewhere new, has not been publicly disclosed. But the receipt of that data is itself a development. The forensic machinery is producing output, and output, even when it does not immediately resolve a case, changes what investigators can do next. Alongside the forensic developments, the human dimension of this story has become more visible. Savannah Guthrie, the prominent television personality whose mother remains missing, has returned to her morning anchor role. A colleague who appeared alongside her publicly praised her strength. That moment, played out in front of cameras that Nancy Guthrie's family knows well, was a quiet testament to what this family has been carrying since the day she disappeared. And there is more. The Pima County Sheriff's Department generated its second significant controversy in as many days. A post from the agency's official account stating that Nancy has been located sent the public into a collective surge of reaction. It was not true. The post was misleading. And the agency is once again facing the kind of criticism that a law enforcement office cannot afford in the middle of an active kidnapping investigation. The case hits a new milestone today, a quiet one, the kind that gets noted rather than celebrated. The days keep accumulating. The investigation keeps moving. And Nancy Guthrie, 84 years old, has still not been found. What we know today is both more and less than what we hoped to know. More because the forensic picture has advanced in specific ways, less because the advance has not yet produced what everyone watching this case is waiting for. This report covers all of it. The DNA, the blood evidence, the home help who were swabbed, the gas station lead, the expert predictions, and a sheriff's department that keeps finding new ways to make a difficult investigation harder. Let us begin with what the science produced, because it produced two distinct results today, and those two results tell very different parts of the same story. The first result involves gloves. Gloves recovered during the investigation of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance were submitted for DNA analysis. The expectation, or at least the hope, was that whoever wore those gloves left biological material inside or on them that could be profiled. DNA from gloves, when it can be extracted, can be among the most direct physical links between a suspect and a crime scene. Gloves are worn intentionally. Their presence at or near a crime scene suggests premeditation, and what is left inside them can tell investigators something about who wore them. The DNA results on the gloves came back, and they hit another dead end. That phrase, another dead end, carries weight in the context of this investigation. It reflects a pattern of evidence that has been significant enough to pursue but insufficient so far to deliver the identification investigators need. That is one result. Now the other. The FBI has received DNA data from hair samples taken from inside Nancy Guthrie's home. According to sources familiar with the matter, that data is now in the Bureau's hands. This is a different situation from the gloves. The hair evidence was treated from the start as potentially critical. It was the evidence that prompted the escalation to Quantico. And now the process of extraction and profiling has progressed to the point where the FBI has data to work with. The question of what that data shows is the central unanswered question of the forensic dimension of this case. A new timeline has emerged regarding when investigators expect to have a fuller picture of what the hair DNA reveals. That timeline has not been publicly specified in detail, but its emergence as a reported element of the investigation signals that the wait is not indefinite. The scientists at Quantico know what they are working with, and they have communicated to investigators a projected timeframe for their assessment. While the forensic picture develops, investigators took an additional step in the DNA collection process. Individuals employed as home help to Nancy Guthrie, people who worked in her residence on a regular basis, have been swabbed. Their DNA has been collected and submitted for comparison. This is a standard investigative procedure in cases involving physical evidence recovered from a private residence. When hair or other biological material is found in a home, investigators need reference samples from everyone who had legitimate access to that space. The swabbing of home help does not suggest those individuals are suspects. It is the process of elimination that allows investigators to identify which biological material in the home is not explained by routine access, and which therefore represents something that needs to be further investigated. But it does tell us something about the investigation's current focus. The team is building a comprehensive biological map of who was in Nancy Guthrie's home on a regular basis. That map, when complete, allows any unaccounted for DNA profile to stand out clearly. Whatever the hair evidence at Quantico has produced, the process of contextualizing it against known individuals is now actively underway. The blood evidence is a separate dimension that has received specific forensic attention. According to reporting on the blood evidence found in connection with this case, an FBI profiler has addressed what the pattern of blood spots suggests about the circumstances of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. The specific characterization that emerged from that analysis is that the blood evidence is consistent with a position in which the victim may have been face down. Hollow blood spots, as forensic profilers describe them, carry specific interpretive meaning. The shape of a blood spot at a scene is not random. It reflects the angle, height, and movement associated with the source. The interpretation of Nancy Guthrie as possibly having been face down during the incident at her home adds a physical dimension to the timeline of what happened there. It is not a comfortable detail. It suggests a level of physical violence or restraint that the crime's classification as a kidnapping already implied. But forensic specificity matters in these cases. It helps investigators reconstruct events that no witness fully observed. Coming up, a lead that has generated cautious optimism, gas station footage that investigators are examining, and the question of whether a broader regional connection is being considered. Not every development in an investigation comes from a laboratory. Some come from the kind of mundane infrastructure that has become so common in American life that it is easy to forget how much it records. Gas station security cameras are everywhere. They capture license plates, faces, vehicles, and the ordinary movements of people who have no idea they are being filmed. For investigators, they are sometimes the clearest window into what happened in a specific geography at a specific time. In the Nancy Guthrie case, a gas station lead has emerged that is being described in available reporting in terms of cautious optimism. The precise nature of what investigators have found or are examining in connection with gas station footage has not been publicly detailed. But the characterization of this lead as a source of hope at a moment when the forensic picture has produced mixed results is significant. It suggests investigators believe they may have captured something useful on camera, something that could speak to the question of who was in the area, in what vehicle, and at what time. Gas station footage can corroborate or challenge other pieces of evidence. If investigators have a partial vehicle description, security footage that shows a matching vehicle at a location consistent with the timeline is meaningful. If investigators are working from a behavioral profile of the perpetrators, footage that shows someone whose movements align with that profile adds another layer. The footage itself may not identify anyone, but it can narrow a field. And in a case where the forensic path has produced dead ends, as often as it has produced forward movement, a visual lead with geographic specificity is valuable. This development comes alongside a separate analytical contribution from a former federal agent who has publicly raised a connection that broadens the geographic and criminal context of this investigation. According to available reporting, an ex-FBI agent has floated a potential link between the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping and an Arizona case involving a teenager. The nature of that suggested connection, whether it is based on methodology, behavioral pattern, geographic proximity, or some combination of those factors, has not been fully detailed in public reporting. Investigative hypotheses of this kind, connections suggested by experienced former agents based on available information, are not the same as confirmed investigative leads, but they are not without value. Former agents who spent careers building pattern recognition around criminal behavior do not raise these connections casually. If someone with that background sees a parallel between what happened to Nancy Guthrie and something that happened elsewhere in Arizona, it is at least worth the investigative question of whether that parallel warrants examination. At the same time, investigators are contending with a characterization of the search that reflects the anxiety of a case stretched across many weeks without resolution. The description being used by some experts to characterize the current state of the investigation is hot and cold. The case has had moments of apparent forward momentum, developments that look like they might be the break, and then returns to uncertainty. That pattern in long-running cases is one of the things that most strains the resources of investigative teams and the patience of families. Experts who are raising concern about that hot and cold dynamic are suggesting the case may be approaching what they call a chilling turning point. That phrase reflects a specific fear in missing persons investigations. After a certain amount of time, the nature of what investigators are looking for can shift. Physical evidence degrades. Witnesses' memories become less reliable, and the window for certain kinds of resolution narrows. That assessment is not a conclusion, it is a concern. And the investigators actively working this case are presumably working against exactly that timeline pressure every day. The gas station lead, if it yields something usable, could be precisely the kind of concrete visual anchor that interrupts the hot and cold cycle. It would give investigators something specific to pursue, something with a timestamp and a location, something that does not depend on the patience of a laboratory process. Up next, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, which managed to generate a second major controversy inside a single week, and what it means for an investigation that cannot afford these distractions. There are moments in an investigation when the institutions that are supposed to support the search for answers instead become part of the story in a way that serves no one. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has now had two of those moments in rapid succession. The first was documented in earlier reporting, a post from the sheriff referencing the name Nancy in a context that observers described as deeply inappropriate given the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie drew widespread criticism. The department responded with a statement citing technical issues. The second is more serious. The Pima County Sheriff's Agency posted a message on its official account stating, in words that the public read as unambiguous, that Nancy has been located. That post went out, people saw it. The reaction was immediate. For anyone following this case, for family members, for investigators, for the public at large, those four words carried enormous emotional weight. Nancy has been located. If true, they would represent the resolution that everyone has been hoping for across more than 80 days. It was not true. The post was misleading. The agency was subsequently criticized sharply for it. The nature of the post, whether it was a technical error, a reference to a different Nancy, a miscommunication, or something else entirely, was not explained in a way that resolved the public's concern. What it produced was a wave of reaction that turned from relief to anger in a matter of moments. In the context of an active federal kidnapping investigation, this kind of incident is not simply an embarrassment. It has the potential to affect the investigation itself. It reaches family members who have been living with uncertainty for months. It reaches investigators who then have to manage the fallout. It reaches the public, whose engagement with this case through tip lines and public attention is part of the investigative infrastructure. The pressure on the Pima County Sheriff's Department to cooperate with external search resources has also intensified. According to available reporting, there is active pressure on the sheriff to grant permission to the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue organization with a track record of deployment in major missing persons cases, to join the search for Nancy Guthrie. The organization, known for its use of watercraft and on-the-ground search teams in remote or difficult terrain, has been positioned by advocates as a potentially useful resource. The sheriff's decision on that request has not been publicly confirmed in available reporting, but the pressure to grant access reflects a public sentiment that has grown around this case. People want to help. Organized volunteer groups with experience in search operations want to contribute. The question of whether local law enforcement will facilitate that contribution or whether institutional concerns about coordination and liability will stand in the way is one the Sheriff's Department now has to answer under significant public scrutiny. A trail that has reportedly gone cold, an agency that is generating its own headlines for the wrong reasons, and a volunteer organization waiting for permission to search. These three elements of the current situation reflect the particular kind of pressure that accumulates in a long-running, high-profile missing persons case when the expected mechanisms of resolution have not yet produced results. The FBI's leadership of this investigation continues. Federal investigators are not dependent on the Sheriff's Department for their primary operational direction, but the local dimension of the investigation exists within the territory and jurisdiction that the Sheriff's Office controls. A department that is managing its own institutional challenges is a less effective partner in that capacity. One former FBI agent with public visibility in this case has made a final prediction about the direction the investigation will ultimately take. The nature of that prediction, whether optimistic or sobering, reflects years of professional pattern recognition applied to a case with very specific characteristics. That prediction has not resolved the case, but it has added another layer of analytical perspective to a story that is still being actively written. In the final part, we bring together everything that has developed today and examine what it means for the case going forward. Take stock of what today has produced in the Nancy Guthrie investigation, and you find a picture that is more complex than either pure progress or pure stagnation. The forensic picture advanced and stalled in the same day. The gloves produced no identification. The hair DNA is in investigators' hands. The home help have been swabbed to build a biological elimination map of the residence. Blood evidence has been interpreted by an FBI profiler in a way that adds physical specificity to the timeline of what happened. A new timeline for the DNA evidence has emerged, suggesting investigators expect to know more within a defined period. That is movement. It is not resolution. But in a case of this duration, movement in the forensic track is not nothing. The visual evidence track has generated something that observers are calling a source of hope. Gas station footage is being examined. Whatever is on that footage has not been disclosed, but the characterization of it is hopeful in a case where recent forensic developments have repeatedly produced dead ends, marks it as something investigators appear to be taking seriously. The analytical framework around this case has expanded. A former federal agent has suggested a potential link to an Arizona teenager case, raising questions about whether this investigation should be considered in a broader regional criminal context. Whether that connection is pursued as a formal investigative lead is not known from available reporting, but it represents the kind of widening of the investigative lens that sometimes produces the most unexpected breakthroughs. If you have been following this case and want to stay with it as it develops through what investigators are acknowledging could be a critical coming period, subscribing ensures you will not miss the next report. The pace of developments in the past 2 days alone reflects how quickly this story can move. The Pima County Sheriff's Department has emerged as an institutional liability in a case that requires steady, credible local cooperation. Two controversies in rapid succession, the inappropriate post and now the false location announcement, have damaged the department's standing in the eyes of the public and, arguably, in the eyes of the federal partners who are leading this investigation. The pressure to allow the United Cajun Navy to participate in the search reflects a public that is losing confidence in official channels and looking toward volunteer organizations for the kind of visible, on-the-ground activity that formal law enforcement has not delivered. The family is visible and present in this story in ways that carry their own weight. Savannah Guthrie's return to her anchor role, accompanied by a public expression of support from a longtime colleague, was a moment that reminded the country that this is not an abstract investigation. It is a family's ongoing emergency. The public praise of her strength was genuine. The fact that she needs that strength 80-plus days into her mother's disappearance reflects a situation that has not gotten easier. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. The search for her changes as time passes, according to investigators themselves. Not just in the emotional sense, in the practical, operational sense, the methods that apply in the first days of a disappearance give way to methods suited to a longer investigation. The forensic work that was urgent becomes patient. The canvassing that was broad becomes targeted. The public engagement that was immediate becomes sustained. Whether this case, at the milestone it has now quietly reached, is heading toward resolution or heading toward a longer period of sustained investigation without an announced result, cannot be said from the outside. A former FBI agent has made a prediction. The gas station footage may speak. The hair DNA timeline may deliver what the gloves did not. What is certain is that the case has not been abandoned. The work continues on multiple tracks with federal resources that do not give up on an elderly woman taken from her home. What the next period brings remains to be seen. The question that started this story is still the only question that matters. Where is Nancy Guthrie?